and we'll get started here soon. Just a few housekeeping rules or matter of business. If you have a question, and I'm just realizing that our chat is probably not enabled. Just make sure we do that first. We can open it up in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so everyone should be able to get into the chat now. If you do have a question, please put it in there, or actually put it in the Q&A function. But we invite everyone to put their name and their organization in the chat so that we can see who's joining us today. So Matt, can you see our screen, the screen?
Yes, we see it. We're all good.
Great. Awesome, thank you. Well, again, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about community choice aggregation, and this is a really exciting opportunity in Pennsylvania, particularly since we don't have community solar yet in Pennsylvania. But even if we do get community solar, this is still a wonderful option. Unfortunately, right now it's just for boroughs, but that's still a good opportunity. Before we dive in, we're going to give you a little background about Pennsylvania Solar Center. But I do want to welcome our speakers who are joining Matt and I today. We have Liz Robinson from the Philadelphia Solar Energy Association, Dennis Rowan, who's heading up the CCA effort, CCA for Pennsylvania, Baird Brown, who is a established and very well-known attorney and who's been helping out in this effort, John McKinstry of Swarthmore Borough, who's one of the first boroughs to embark on this journey. And we have got Mike Gordon from Jewel Assets and Ron Salentano from the Pennsylvania Solar and Storage Industries Association. So thank you all for joining us. The vision and mission of Pennsylvania Solar Center is that we become a leader in renewable energy through the rapid and broad expansion of in-state solar generation. And we accomplish this by providing trusted guidance to usher all Pennsylvanians into the clean energy economy. We are very fortunate to have a large number of supporters, including our foundation community from the Hillman Foundation, the Heinz Endowments, and the Richard King Mellon Foundation, as well as our business sponsors. And if you would like to join this list, we would absolutely love to talk to you about that. And of course, we have a large number of individual donors, and we very much appreciate that support so that we can keep doing things like these webinars and all of the other work that we're doing at Pennsylvania Solar Center. So we say that we work to transform, educate, and to advocate. And we do this by, in our transform bucket, we say that we are walking the walk with our technical assistance program called our Get Solar program. And this particular program is helping basically any non-residential entity through the solar procurement process. So we have schools and municipalities, small businesses, large businesses, nonprofits, who we will do a solar feasibility study on, help them understand what their potential is for solar, put their project out to bid, and then help them understand those bids, and then get to the next step of understanding all the financial capital and capital stacks that need to happen, the IRA tax credits or grant programs, and how they can move forward to go solar. And we do this in a number of different ways where we have people just kind of coming in on their own. We call those the trailblazers. And we're also working very intentionally within specific communities where we're working with community leaders to try to get them to bring their organizations in their community into the program. We're going to start really focusing on critical infrastructure to build resiliency into those communities as well. So including solar and storage and microgrids. And we also have a Pennsylvania schools program that we work in partnership with Generation 180. We now have over 200 projects in our project queue, and it's really exciting. We have facilitated over 2 megawatts of solar projects, and we have about 50 megawatts of projects potential in our queue. So it's a really awesome program that we're really proud of. We also work to educate particularly things like the Watts and Learn webinar series, our newsletter. We do a program called Lodestar, where we're recognizing and lifting up all of those leaders who have already gone solar across the state. And of course, our policy, education, and advocacy. Matt Mahoney is heading this up, and he updates the legislative guide as soon as we get new policies there. So that's a really wonderful reference tool for understanding all the different policies that are out there. And our policy goals have been for a while and still are to increase Pennsylvania's renewable goals by 30% by 2030. And we really want to see that bumped up to about 14% of in-state solar. So right now it's a 0.5% solar, and Matt's going to talk a little bit about that. We would like to see community solar enabled. And of course, we're going to be working to defend any unfriendly solar policies. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Matt Mahoney. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much, Sharon. And I'll keep it quick so we can dive right into the content. On to the next slide. Just to everybody a sense of where Pennsylvania is, just as a quick update. Recently, we had municipal elections, and the balance of power here in the House of Representatives stands at 102 and 101, but is set to return to 101 to 101 after a victory in Representative John Galloway in Bucks County. So now back to 101 to 101, meaning the balance of power is as we could say, as balanced as it could be between the two. So no special election has been called yet, which could happen soon or up until January. But this is important as we're looking at different clean energy policies and how we can reach consensus and find common ground to advance clean energy policy, renewable energy policy, to get 30% renewables by 2030. We have to work very broadly with a strong coalition of supporters. So knowing that we're working with the legislature, there's many different components going on. Many of you have heard that the recent Reggie ruling, the Commonwealth Court ruled in favor of those arguing against Reggie, which starts a 30-day clock for appealing to the state Supreme Court. We don't have any other updates on that, but are watching the issue as it does impact energy policy here in Pennsylvania. So into the policy, just a real quick update onto the next slide. Onto some bills that we're taking a close look at. Of course, House Bill 1467. We've seen a good amount of movement over the past month, lots more support, more legislators joining on as co-sponsors, which this bill would increase the renewable energy goals in Pennsylvania through the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard to 30% renewables by 2030. And I'll go into a little bit more of the detail later on. But another bill, just to put on folks' radar, if you haven't seen yet, House Bill 1842, which would be a standalone act called the Community Solar Act. It's a bill that was just recently introduced by Representative Schweier in the House and would establish community solar bill credits under the Public Utility Code. In previous versions of community solar bills that we've seen, there's been the inclusion of things that we've heard, things that have been called a grid service payments. This bill does not include the reference to a grid service payment and actually relies on the SRECs as an important part of the financial calculation for community solar. So this bill really would rely if passed, really would rely on a healthy SREC market in Pennsylvania. And another thing that we're hearing some interest on is that there's interest in including prevailing wage language that aligns with the Inflation Reduction Act requirements for those to receive those solar installations to receive the 30% credit. So we're hearing interest from legislators to include that type of language. So we're taking a close look and talking with legislators about how we can work that in. So next slide, into some of the reasons why this is important. So as we all may or may not know, Pennsylvania has a goal of 0.5% solar, and we've met that goal and we're exceeding that goal, which is good that we're installing more solar. However, it harms existing solar owners. As we see on this chart on the right, we see that indicates the SREC market. That SREC market is the financial incentive provided to solar owners and other renewable energy or solar owners. And we're seeing that price drop because of the oversupply of credits that are being created, which to remedy this, we need to increase our goals here in Pennsylvania. Next slide. Another reason why updating the alternative energy portfolio standard is important is because our electricity mix is becoming less diverse, and we're seeing more price shocks hitting consumers. As an example, in 2022, when natural gas prices increased because of geopolitical issues, we saw consumer electricity prices here in the United States and Pennsylvania particularly see increases in those electricity prices. So it's important that we address this through increasing the diversity of our energy portfolio, and the most proven and effective tool that's been able to do that so far is the alternative energy portfolio standard. So a little bit more into the bill itself, onto the next slide. The alternative energy portfolio standard, if as we may or may not know, it was signed in 2004, an incredibly important bill in Pennsylvania's renewable energy policies as far as that goes. Requires utilities to obtain 18%, and we've gotten there by May 2021. We've reached that goal, and to date, there are several proposals that have been introduced to increase those goals, but the General Assembly has not moved on those goals, and we're eagerly working to ensure that legislators know this is an important issue, and that we need to increase the goals to ensure that those existing solar owners aren't seeing their SREC prices plummet, and that we can signal to other states, as we see on this map on the right-hand side, that we're aligning with regional goals so that we can take advantage of federal incentives and compete on the national stage and at least the regional stage when attracting investors for more solar development projects and opportunities. Next slide. What the bill that does that and achieves that is House Bill 1467, as well as its companion, Senate Bill 230, which would increase the goals, the Tier 1 goals, the renewable energy goals in the alternative energy portfolio standard to 30% by 2030. The bill would also enable community solar. Currently, community solar is not available in Pennsylvania, but this bill would enable community solar. And importantly, this bill recognizes each of the distinctive markets, ensuring that all markets are treated equitably within the solar space. So customer generators aren't competing with grid scale generators, and community solar is given its share as well. So I believe the last slide I have is just the benefits. Why does this matter? So getting to 10% solar provides billions in economic development opportunities and investment potential. These are farmers' leases, these are business opportunities, these are workforce development opportunities, and they're opportunities that impact all of us. All of us that receive and use electricity benefit from this, because once we get to 10% solar, even 5% solar, we start to see electricity prices start to drop because of because solar is the least expensive resource available on the grid. So it helps all of us, and it provides many, many vast opportunities for Pennsylvania to take advantage of. So with that, let's transition off into the content, and I'll hand the mic off to Liz to kick us off into the conversation on CCA for PA.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt, and thanks, Sharon. We're really happy to be here. Next slide, please. And we've been working, I'm going to actually just turn this over to Dennis. Dennis, are you there?
I am here. Yep.
Okay, I'll just turn this right over to you.
Great. Thanks, Liz, and thanks, Matt and Sharon. Thanks for all the Solar Center does. And our goals are totally in line with the Solar Center. We want to bring more renewable energy to Pennsylvania, and we see CCA as a existing regulatory pathway exists for boroughs, as you said, Sharon, but we also think municipalities can adopt CCA, and we are in the process right now, a very critical stage, presenting our implementation plan to the Public Utility Commission so that local governments can aggregate their electricity load and purchase and develop power on behalf of their residents to attain their energy, economic, and environmental goals. Next slide. So this is a borough and municipal movement. a number of years ago, I was speaking with many people on the call here, talking about the state of renewables. And one by one, many boroughs and municipalities around the state of Pennsylvania were adopting resolutions to get more renewable energy, but we've been stymied. And you were just enumerating the current efforts. So CCA is saying to these local governments, especially boroughs, as Baird will get into, we do have a clear borough pathway. Existing in their plans, CCA is mentioned, including Pennsylvania's Climate Action Plan, Philadelphia, Westchester Council Governments, and 43 communities in Southeast PA who have passed resolutions to be ready for 100% renewable energy. So CCA is totally congruent with all these resolutions, and we're early in our process. We've gone to about 20 boroughs directly, and through webinars reached about 100 others, and we're continuing that effort to all 956 boroughs and municipalities, because we believe CCA will come to all of Pennsylvania. Next slide. And as I just mentioned, CCA is totally congruent with renewable energy goals, combating climate change, better energy supply terms for the residents, adds consumer protection, resilience, and supports local renewable energy jobs. Next slide. So Pennsylvania, as you just, there you go, thank you. And the map, CCA has existed in the country for about 15 years. I believe Massachusetts was the first. And CCAs around the country are kicking butt on attaining their renewable energy goals. So that's why we think it's so valuable and fits right in hand with the goals of the Solar Center. Reached out to Liz and Ron a number of years ago. And the reason they're on board is they also see CCA as a way to really kickstart renewable energy development in Pennsylvania. And we've been actively investigating for 3 years. I'm going to turn it over to Baird Brown from Echo and Law, the principal there, to talk about the existing borough pathway. Baird?
Yeah, that's either econ law or eco law. It's the end can be silent or not, but it's not it's not in its own category. So the reason we've been talking about boroughs and two boroughs is because in the borough code, there's not only the power highlighted first here to manufacture or purchase electricity for the use of its inhabitants. A lot of different Pennsylvania municipal entities have that power, but what's down there is 24A02D. The third highlight is that nobody can sell electricity in a borough without the consent of the council. And so the council can make choices about who's delivering power in the borough. And we think that leads you to a sort of a clear legislative path to boroughs adopting CCA. We note that Act 138, which is what adopted retail choice in Pennsylvania, even though it established retail choice, preserved that power of boroughs in the retail choice law. So we're pretty comfortable about that. And we have been sort of taking this our concept on the road and starting to introduce it to players who will be important. We've had a number of conversations with PECO because the 5 boroughs that have signed up so far are all in PECO's service territory, but we'll reach out to other utilities as we go. And they have been supportive and said that they can make this happen. They're going to probably need some help from the PUC on delivering the right information that we need, but the PUC has established a procedure for doing that. So we feel pretty comfortable about that. And then we've talked with the consumer advocate office in the PUC, and they were quite enthusiastic. And so we're feeling good about that. And we're in the middle of setting up meetings with individual commissioners to try and just discuss the plan broadly before we make any formal presentation to the PUC. So that's where that stands. Next slide. And just to show how this works, the way the world works now, you either get your power from the utility, who is providing the wires and the distribution service and the default energy supply, and doing the billing and payment for everybody, or you've selected an EGS, and in which case you get an energy supply from them, but the billing cycles around through the utility all the same. And both the EGS or the utility, as the case may be, gets their energy from the wholesale markets. What we're suggesting, if you go to the next slide, is basically to introduce one new factor here, at least with that the borough would go out and select an EGS or more than one to provide power to its residents under the same overall scheme. Nothing else would really change, except that in the procurement for the EGS, the borough would, get to choose what the mix of energy is, and they can choose 100% green energy or whatever it is that they think makes sense for their residents. They get to, get EGSs competing on price for a large block of load, and they get to determine the terms of the contract that EGSs would have with their customers in the community, so that they can do consumer protection from, all of a sudden, oops, my price went up 50% at the end of my first year, kind of thing that have happened with a lot of EGSs. So what we're doing is trying to fit into the existing PUC blessed scheme, and but bring some supervision and competition to the EGSs and get the renewable energy that our communities all want. So with that, I will turn it on over to Mike Gordon of Joule Energy.
Thank you. And I just want to connecting with what Baird is saying, even in the presence of an aggregation in your community, you continue to get the bill from the utility, as Baird is pointing out. You continue to get maintenance on the poles and wires from the utility. You continue to pay that transmission and distribution portion of your bill to the utility. In fact, you pay also the energy portion to the utility, which then pays it to the chosen electricity supplier, the municipality's chosen electricity supplier. So it looks much the same. The only difference is that anybody who has not already chosen a competitive EGS is sent a letter, and if they want to prevent being moved over, they absolutely may prevent being moved over by calling or sending back a postage paid letter, or going onto the web and saying no. But if they don't do anything, they will be moved over if they do nothing. And that's the reason that you're getting these large contracts with more, you're able to get the consumer protections. So currently, the state has determined that your default electricity supplier is going to be the utility. All this does is it changes that determination from the state level to the local borough level. They then decide that, oh yeah, the first one in line is gonna be who it is that we choose for our residents. They still have the utility as an option. They still have the private EGS market as an option. But the first one in line is the one that the municipality has chosen. So speaking to this slide, we started with, in New York, we started, just to share some experience in New York, we started with a pilot project, Westchester County. You'll see some more of how it has worked out later, a couple slides down. We have extended to sorry,
Okay.
go back. Sorry, apologies. We have extended to a number, actually 58 municipalities now, with well over 500,000 households, and it's going pretty well. And it's going without a whole heck of a lot of agita. And so now we can go one more slide. Thank you. And I'll just talk briefly about the objectives. So because you're bringing such a large block of folks to the table, we have set up contractual structures that can drive the construction of new renewable power plants. Happy to explore that, because I know there are a number of solar developers, I think, maybe asset owners on the call. So I'm happy to explore that with more depth. The other objective that we have in this program is that we want to create better reliability. And we also, as a whole, want to marry real local empowerment with federally funded programs that really match our local objectives. And we can also talk more about that as well. We are signing one or a couple of contracts, as Baird was pointing out, could be with a couple of suppliers, it's possible. And these contracts are specifically focused on protecting consumers as we benefit the environment. So we can go on to the next slide. And this is just an example of how the Sustainable Westchester contract worked. It was about 110,000 homes, saved about $17 million over the course of that first 30-month period. However, it was two contracts with two suppliers. However, you see where the savings come, because in this case, we're talking about less volatile rates. In this case, it was a fixed rate. And so if you see that orange line is the fixed rate, and that's renewable power. And then you see how the utility rate, which is the comparison, goes all over the map. Now, some months, in fact, it's lower. As you see, I think there were 3 months in there that it's lower. If I'm looking at the full graph, and I'm going to move the little thing, 4 months in that entire time when the utility rate was lower. But in this case, all other months, 4 or 5 months, all other months were basically higher. And in aggregate, it saved $17 million. And I'd say that in the ensuing years, what we've tended to do, it's interesting, the CCA rates and CCA rates across the country have been between kind of matched utility rates, 2% savings versus utility rates, up to 20% savings. But the 20% savings are coming at these really volatile price moments, so that, for instance, last year in our New York program, we saved residents $18 million versus utility rates. Now that's, when the market goes crazy. If you look at the 3 years before that, we saved residents $2 million in toto. So, and that's pretty much the way the programs have been working around the nation. Let's keep going. And then I know that this, is a little bit, the slide itself has a lot of repetition on it, but the thing that I want to focus on is the 117,000 hours of public education. It is our job to make sure that people understand. Now, what that means is, yeah, you're doing all the education that you can do up front, but realistically, you're going to go into this thing and still 15-20% of the people are going to know about it, and 80% of the people are going to be surprised when they get that little letter in the mail. So it means that over the course of the contract, you're getting calls all the time You're continuing to do education. You're engaging people in energy decisions in the community. You're connecting folks to federal programs and funding opportunities. By the time you finish a 2-year program, everybody knows about it. And it becomes pretty well ensconced in the community. So let's keep going. And this is what you achieve. You know, without CCA, roughly 5% of the people or less are going into renewable power. And with it, when the community elects to make this kind of front of the line contract, roughly 80 to 90% of the folks in the community are buying renewably. And that's the example in New York, but it's been across the country in 10 states throughout the country. And so basically, you know, the head of the line contract, that becomes the behavioral norm. And I guess we can go on, and then I can send you over to John McKinstry, who is going to tell you about Swarthmore's decision and perspective. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. I'm John McKinstry, and I'm the co-chair of Swarthmore's Environmental Advisory Council. Swarthmore had adopted a Ready for 100 resolution many years ago, and we were very, very excited about it. But we were really concerned about how we were actually going to meet our goal of getting to 100% electricity. Relying on just individuals to change over was cumbersome and limited, and as was just mentioned, you know, you get maybe 5%. We're a little higher than that in Swarthmore, but still we're nowhere near 100%. And so when we learned about CCA, we were very, very excited about that. And we see four main advantages to having CCA. The first is obviously that we're going to get much more close to our 100% goal of green electricity, because the default will now be for green electricity, but people can still opt out, and that's why you don't get to 100%. But the second reason, as already mentioned, is the consumer ease and protection. There are many of us in Swarthmore who had signed up with green electric providers, but somewhere along the line, and there was fine print in the contracts that we signed, in my case, my electric rates triple, and mine is not an isolated example. And when I called the provider and I said, well, what's happening there? They immediately offered to take me back down to the original price. But by that point, the trust was gone. We wanted something a little more reliable. So the very fact that you have the borough negotiating for the electricity is that important consumer protection. And the fact that there's so many people buying it, you have the market power to get competitive rates. So that was a second reason we liked it. As also just mentioned, the stability is another reason we like. But the fourth reason we like is the fact that this could be a source of local jobs and projects. In Swarthmore, we've explored the idea of having next to our train station solar array, so people can charge their EVs, and then the excess electricity has to be purchased by someone. Well, the CCA is what could be purchasing that. So it's meeting a lot of our goals. And so we're very, very excited to be exploring this. The CCA for PA has been a great resource to doing this. And once everything is through the PUC, we're looking forward to the next steps of actually doing the public education and signing on. So we're very, very excited about this project.
Thanks, John. Go ahead. Were you still going to continue, John?
I'm finished. Thank you.
I just wanted to add on here that at the top of this screen are the 5 boroughs that are signed on with memorandum of understanding so far. Narberth was the first, followed by Swarthmore, then Media, then Lansdowne, and the most recent is Hatboro. And collectively, this is 17,000 residences. But I also wanted to clarify that the CCA process pulls in all meters, I'll call it, all end users. So it's commercial and and residential customers. We are actively inviting many more boroughs across the state. And that's really why we're reaching out to you today, is to open a discussion with new boroughs. We are meeting with a lot of boroughs all across the state and have seen a lot of interest everywhere. But we're very actively encouraging boroughs to talk with us and join this effort. And I'll turn it over to Ron Solentano.
Actually, Dennis, you may want to talk about this part.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to add anything, Ron, before I get into where
No,
we are?
well, I could put my piece in right here. And
Yep.
as was kind of talked about already before, we're talking about the target audience, if you will, within a borough would be those out of which have not switched from their default supplier. So, for example, in Pico's case, anyone who still stayed with Pico, they would be the ones that would be eligible up front and would be within this group. Anyone who has already chose a third-party supplier or an EGS could certainly change and can be within the CTA group if they wish to do that, but they wouldn't be bumped, if you will, outside of who they've already chosen. Same with customers with solar or under net metering, because they should be with their default supplier in order to get the most benefit from that metering. So they also would not be included within this group. But when you look at across the state in general, on average, about 80% of residential customers have not switched. So that's a pretty good, healthy batch to target within, for a PPA implementation. And again, it's an opt-out. So anyone who is a member of the CCA or a subscriber, if you will, they can always opt out and go with a third party or get solar, and they would then get, not be part of that group any longer. So that's really the big benefit, as was talked about before. It's the opt-out that gives the enormous amount of benefit for having a lot of renewable intact very quickly. That's about it. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Ron. So this slide shows our process and where we are. The beginning is easy because all of you on the call, if you're with the borough or a town, or if you're a solar expert, everybody has an existing goal to adopt more renewable energy. I think the stat in Pennsylvania is 80% of Pennsylvanians want more renewable energy. So they've already been exploring different avenues. So that's step one. And again, this is a borough-led initiative. Joule, the MOU basically says that Joule and CCA for PA will develop the implementation plan in accord with the borough and the municipalities. I'll talk about the municipalities more in a minute. So where we are in this process now is very exciting. As I said, we started about 3 years ago, and we're at the point where we've developed a very thorough implementation plan. And that's after we met with PICO a number of times. We will be continuing to work with PICO. As Liz mentioned, our first 5 boroughs are all in PICO's territory. And the last 2 nights I was with Conshohocken Borough and Ambler Borough, who both voted unanimously in their EAC to go to council. So as Ron just said, we anticipate more boroughs, and we are going statewide with this to all 956 boroughs. And then that borough pathway will be opening up the municipal pathway. That's our belief. So after we go through the implementation plan with the PUC, and we're not going for approval, it's a little bit of a political tap dance, but since it's in the borough code, we're asking for collaboration. Are we obeying all existing regulations and accord with them? The same with the utilities, the EDCs around the state. We're trying to create a collaborative win-win because we have this unique transition happening. We all know that, transition to local distributed energy resources. Sharon mentioned microgrids. We have this unique opportunity with the BIL and the IRA. So once we get through this current step, we're going to go back to the boroughs and develop their plans, then go out to RFPs. And the timeline is to be determined, but we're pretty optimistic that in 2024, we will have our first CCAs operating in Pennsylvania. And so our ask is, before I open up the questions, is, continue the dialogue with us. And whether you're a solar developer, as Mike and others mentioned, our intent is to create renewable energy projects in Pennsylvania. So at that, we'll open it up. Unless anybody on our team wants to add, we'll open it up to questions.
We've got some.
Great.
Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat as well as in the Q&A. So hopefully anybody that still has a question, please put it in the Q&A or the chat. But this first question is for Baird regarding maybe a specific decision that hopefully you're familiar with. The 2011 PUC decision on community choice aggregation played a role in current interactions with the current Public Utility Commission. So how has that decision on CCA played a role in current interactions with the PUC?
Well, yeah, no, we've thought very hard about that decision. First of all, it was not a decision about CCA. It was a decision about an opt-out program for a municipality, and it neither considered the powers of boroughs, which we think is very different, nor did it consider what it seemed to consider really is a CCA, an EGS coming to a community and saying, oh, let us make a deal with you and to take over all your customers, and boy, will we give you a good deal. There was no sort of public interest motivation, and it was the EGS that was leading the charge. What we're trying to do is the borough is leading the charge. This is not for the benefit of any EGS, and we think that we think there's a clear path legally for the borough to do it. We would like to do it with EGSs, and therefore we think that we want to talk it through with the PUC and make sure they feel comfortable with that. But we think the circumstances are very different. I would point out one other thing in that regard, that since 2011, the jurisprudence around the Environmental Rights Amendment in the Pennsylvania Constitution has become much more clear. And it's clear not only that the boroughs are trustees for the environment for their citizens, but also the Public Utility Commission is a trustee for the environment for all the citizens of Pennsylvania, and that the motivation here to combat climate change by bringing more renewable energy is something that was definitely not on the table when the PUC was looking at this in 2011. So we're very hopeful actually that not only is there a direct borough path, but it's clear under the law and prior PUC decisions that the PUC could open this up to any municipality. And we hope that's where it will go, but we're starting with the folks that have the clearest path under the law.
Let me add to that Baird's referring to an 08 decision, right, Baird? Another decision in 08, where they did allow for an opt-out program because they felt it was to the clear benefit of the community. And interestingly, the 11 decision itself confirmed the idea that an opt-out program does not violate any slamming positions in Pennsylvania law. So, and they explicitly said, no, we're not going to talk about borough stuff, specific borough stuff. So the 11 decision is not really problematic, and the 08 decision is confirmatory. So we are charting a path. We know it is not going to be easy.
I'll be a little lawyerish. It's a 2006 decision that was the
thank
first
you.
one. And it said that there was no problem with utilities collaborating with an opt-out program, and the question, it really didn't address the question of what EGSs can do. And I think that's the one where we want to have a thoughtful discussion with the Utility Commission, and we're on our way. We've reached out to the chair, and he has said he will set up a meeting, but we haven't got it set up yet.
So that is imminent. And I think that addresses another one of your questions, Rachel, about the Public Utility Commission's decision. So, and it also kind of speaks to what Dennis was saying, that, you know, it's a little bit of a tap dance. So we absolutely want Public Service Commission perspective. We believe we are authorized to move ahead. We would like to move ahead in a manner that will flow very smoothly. We feel that that were we to get Public Service Commission support in whatever way, whether it's an authorization or support or asking the utility to issue a data tariff, whatever it is, it'll flow quite a bit more smoothly. But there won't necessarily be a Public Utilities Commission decision on it, because we do have authority.
So taking a sort of a transition, and still some questions from Rachel, and something that I know I'm interested in is the interaction with PECO. And you said you've had good interactions, numerous interactions with PECO. What do you see as those interactions with other power companies proceeding? Do you see them proceeding in a similar way? And have there been any concerns regarding litigation with electric or suppliers?
Nobody has raised that kind of a question yet. I think, I think that just to characterize the discussions with PECO, their principal concern was one of the, to expand on what Mike said, we really want to get data about the customers in the community and whether they have already opted not only for a retail choice option, but as was mentioned, for net metering, or it could be for the CAP program for low income folks. If you've chosen a program that's beneficial to you, we don't want to get in the way of that. So we'd love to get that information in advance, and not get anybody caught in a net that they shouldn't be caught in. And so exploring with the utilities how to get that information in advance of rolling things out was a major concern. And they basically told us, yes, we can get you that information. Our data processing processes will allow us to get it, but we want to make sure that we don't have to give that to everybody and their brother. And as I mentioned earlier, the PUC has now outlined a procedure by which utilities can get a special order that allows them to provide information in particular circumstances. And that's what we would expect the utilities would go through in this circumstance.
Does anybody else have anything else to add there?
I just wanted to make clear that if, let's say, you're currently a customer of the XYZ company and they're selling you 100% renewable or 50% renewable, and you would rather opt in to this borough aggregation, you will be able to do that. So if you're, it's not like you're stuck where you are. So
Yeah.
you will be able to move in.
And to answer your second question, Matt, I think I think it was that, would EGSs basically be upset about this whole thing? Well, they had their chance all these years to try to get customers and they didn't do it. So let them, forget about them. The only other thing to add is that, just to be clear, that so someone outside of the borough couldn't opt in to one within the borough. You have to be a borough citizen, basically. Just a real obvious thing to just point out.
And I also, it's interesting about the EGSs. Some of the EGSs think this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? Because they don't have to go door to door and acquire customers. They can go in and make a bid and provide the requisite consumer protections, and then they get, prospectively, if they win, a whole bunch of customers. So for what we've found is that some of the, how to put this, some of the less stable EGSs may have some resistance to it. That's just been our experience. So some of the ways that we want to get some of the smaller but ethical companies involved is by saying, look, if you're creating all sorts of price protection contracts to protect consumers in this, and you go belly under, well, then we are able, or belly up, belly under, I don't know, then we are able to move those price protection contracts to another EGS. So consumers are protected no matter what happens with some of the smaller EGSs. That's some of the strategies that we've used to get scrupulous smaller EGSs engaged. Larger EGSs generally tend to love it. Sorry, Liz.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna go ahead, finish.
No, I was done.
Okay. I just wanted to, no one has asked this question yet, but I just wanted to mention that we're also really committed to finding ways and ensuring that low-income customers can participate in the CCA with no financial increase, no cost increase in their bill. So we are working very hard using some pathways that have opened up through the IRA. Solar for All, for example, is a possibility. So we're deliberately working to include avenues for low-income customers and environmental justice communities to participate in a way that ensures affordable access to clean energy. And that's a really significant development for Pennsylvania. So is one that we're really focused on as well.
I just want
Go
to
ahead, Ron.
I just want to mention another little, keep adding all these little things, that this is really intended to create additionality, to actually create more, develop more renewables, particularly solar, in the state of Pennsylvania. And as a result, and to meet the criteria for these Ready for 100 communities, that doesn't have any impact on the APS with regard to the requirements that have been established or the goals, because all those credits are actually to be retired within the community or within the borough. Therefore, it doesn't impact or take away or meet any of the the requirements within an alternative energy portfolio standard. Just want to point that out.
And that would be only if they would own the system or the rights to the credits for that particular solar system or renewable
right
system.
The borough would essentially hold that because they want to meet their hard carbon offset, so they would retire them internally. So therefore,
I think this leads to my question.
So
I think
there are a number of other questions here that could be addressed probably quickly. Distributed resource aggregation is a different question. It's an important and useful question, but that has to do with collecting the ability of individual customers to either provide demand response or export energy and selling that into the wholesale markets. And that's something that a CCA could undertake to do. It's something that the Philadelphia Energy Authority, for example, is working on in the form of what's called a virtual power plant in Philadelphia. But it's different than supplying energy, which is what the CCA is about. And there were a couple of other questions.
There's one that to be answered really quickly, and that's, anybody can still, they don't need borough permission to sign a contract with, for instance, a solar provider. Anybody can do that with or without a CCA. It doesn't change a thing. It's just that this allows us to contract in bulk and to therefore negotiate on behalf of many consumers. I'll speak to this quality of green in a second, or quality of clean in a second. But I just wondered if anybody else wants to step in and speak to anything else.
Well, I'll mention net metering. Right now, net metering is extraordinarily favorable as available through the utilities. And although EGSs are permitted to do it, even encouraged to do it, I don't think any of them has. And that's because you're paying a lot, the utility ends up paying a lot more for the power from the net metered customer than they would pay for the same power on the wholesale market. And so it's a, it's a policy that was adopted to speed use of solar. But it is in states where, like California, where there's now 16% of the entire power output of the state is coming from rooftop solar. They have cut way back on the idea of net metering because the system, other people on the system can't afford to pay that much for the power. So it's something that we would like to do, is to buy local power, but whether we could match what the utilities are currently required to do is another matter.
I'll then take a crack at the quality of clean energy, and anybody can jump in. And then, Sharon, we will actually hear your pending question.
My question really was related to what you're going to talk about, Mike. So thank you.
There are a lot of decisions, or there are a couple of decisions that boroughs will be making over the course of this. And it'll be, do you green your power with renewable energy certificates? Do you green your power with specific types of renewable energy certificates? Like one example would be an SREC, right? Do you choose to go like greeny renewable energy certificates? Do you want certificates from in-state? Are you comfortable with out of state? The other possibility is, and so you want to avoid greenwashing. So you want, first of all, total transparency in education. The other thing is, do you want to be spending money on what folks perceive as baloney? And do you want to instead, and not instead, you may buy renewable certificates and that'll be a decision of the individual boroughs on behalf of residents, but you may want to develop, and this is really what we're focusing on, getting into contracts with newly developed renewable power plants and integrating them into the borough supply. Whether you additionally buy those certificates or the power plant sells those certificates in some SREC market or some alternative market, that's really a decision. But we want to develop new stuff. That's where we want to go. Or help spark the development of new stuff. And now I'll shut up.
Thank you, Mike. You answered my question without me even asking it. Perfect.
So I have an add-on with the utility benefit and the utility relationship collaborative. As Mike said in his portion of the presentation, over 117,000 hours of ongoing community education. Sharon mentioned, the numerous BIL and the IRA programs. PECO and other utilities are getting money. Part of those grants require extensive community engagement. And Mike, I'll toss this back to you. The communities in New York that are working with the CCAs, they can, be represented and have those benefits in the program directed to the most needy populations. And the BIL and the IRA requires that type of action, in these utility and community programs. So, we see that, and as Baird said and Mike said, we see this as a win-win, that we're trying to approach it with both the EGSs and the EDCs, the utilities, that way. And Mike, maybe you can talk about that ongoing, community benefit.
Well, if you're sending it over to me, I'm going to speak for a minute, and then I'm sending it to you, John. I need to give you a warning. So, one of the things, I'll speak a little bit about what we're doing with the BIL and the IRA. But one of the things that John is going to get once we got authorization to move ahead, or we know we're going to get the data to be able to move ahead. One of the things that we're going to be asking the community is, who are the informal leadership within the community? And so we will invite that informal leadership to a collaborative discussion so that, yeah, the decisions are going to be made by the formal authorities within the community, but the formal authorities we expect are going to want to be collaborating and engaged and informed by informal authority leadership. And that's a critical kind of staged process within our community education process. And I can tell you that because if you look at the Justice 40 initiative, so much of it is about real community empowerment. It's about the structure of the contracts that you develop. It's about where the money goes. It's about, who the credits are going to. It's about the communities in which you are developing resilience or renewable power within your community. So as an example, in Rochester, Pacific PNNL, Pacific National PNNL, the laboratory, I did a whole project with us where it looks like we're going to be able to take a community that serves 100,000 meals a year to primarily women within a shelter who are leaving abusive relationships, and that shelter, without actually subtracting from the carbon and asthma impact in that community, that shelter is going to have resilience of a storage plant and a solar plant married, funded by the investment tax credit, and it'll come to fruition because we can buy some of the backup products from that plant, as Baird was describing. Similarly, we're developing a capped landfill in Southampton, which is going to provide community solar credits only to low-income communities within Southampton primarily. So there are all sorts of things that you can do with the BIL and the IRA. They look at CCAs as a perfect petri dish for real community empowerment, both informal authority and formal authority. And please add to that, John.
Well, Swarthmore is a very small borough. We only have about 6,000 residents, 7,000 during the school year. But our plan is and so therefore the borough council is actually a very good vehicle for doing this community outreach. But that's exactly what we be doing. Our EAC is supposed to do education for the public, and we'd be helping to orchestrate that with the borough council. But we would also be reaching out to Swarthmore College, which uses a lot of electricity too, and so would involve that a large institution in this as well. So, but we're excited to be able to do the community outreach and the education, and we've been thinking about who should be the ones who are doing the players, but all the expertise that Jewel is going to bring to this would be very welcome.
Yeah, and John raises something that has come up in a lot of the questions, and that's what about commercial and industrial customers and even large educational institutions? And the answer is no, we can't invalidate their current contracts if they have them. So if you have a 3-year supply contract, you could switch at the end of your 3-year supply contract. That goes for individuals too. I mean, that what we propose to do is that anybody can switch anytime with no penalty, for all the customers of the CCA, but a lot of current suppliers have, terms of their contracts that you can't walk away from.
And that's really responsive. I just wanted to add to Thomas Songer's question in there.
Yeah, well, but I also wanted to say that I think that community choice, retail choice is currently available to basically residential and small business customers. And those would be the people that we would address automatically. We would welcome and reach out to commercial and industrial customers, but those folks have by and large already switched. The proportion of large customers that have switched already is much larger than the residential proportion.
As you can tell, we could go on forever.
Well, this is so useful. I don't know if we have any questions that haven't been asked. I don't know that there was a question about the community or the customer assistance programs or people who are on it. I don't know that there was another question in there about, we did talk about that, but how would that work? If, Liz, you mentioned about finding some opportunity, but would that be in addition to the customer?
Right. So customers, yeah, for folks who aren't that familiar with CAP, the customer assistance programs are statewide. Every utility is required to offer them. They provide a level of discount which no one could match. So the customers on CAP are paying an affordable rate depending upon their income. It's an income-based program. They're not paying their full bill. So they are paying a much, much lower price, a much, much lower monthly rate than anyone could possibly meet. So those customers will stay with the utility and they will not be aggregated in to the group initially. So if you're shopping,
yeah, I have a question about that. Sorry. So something like low-income home energy assistance program, at least the way it's working in New York, and I'd like to learn better how it's applied in Pennsylvania, is that it's 10% discount on your bill, really, no matter what, whether you're with a competitive supplier or not.
No,
it's a whole very
differently done. Okay, got it.
And energy efficiency is done through Act 129, and that's a whole different ballgame than any of this.
Yeah, and this is why they've coached us to stay away from these programs, which are specifically done through other agencies, and you cannot then incorporate the free electricity market with them. I do feel that there's real benefit to fixed prices going forward, or to less volatile prices, particularly for low-income folks.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So just to finish what I was trying to get to is that in Pennsylvania, the CAP program is only available to people below 150% of poverty. And if you look at poverty, it affects people between 150 and let's say 250, sometimes even 300% of poverty. So that customer group is completely left out of assistance programs broadly. And that customer group is a huge swath. It's a massive chunk of Pennsylvania. So the CCA program, we would be permitted to look beyond 150%. So looking outside of the CAP universe to customers who are really, really struggling. So working poor, people on pensions, people just, $10 above that cutoff who are, SOL basically.
And the Solar for All program is designed to go higher than 150%. The state through the Pennsylvania Energy Development Authority, along with the Philadelphia Green Capital Corporation, have put in an application on behalf of the state, and we expect to get the probably the maximum, which is about 250 million to go across the state. And the goal of that program is to assure that folks who get solar through the program get a 20% reduction in their bills. So and that application has specifically said that CCAs are a good way to do this, and we're going to work to help make sure that happens. So we're enthusiastic about that.
I just want to elaborate a little bit more on the industrial and commercial customers. I think probably, and we have to yet to talk about this internally, the procurement class 3 and 4 might be not ones that would probably be eligible because they have such complicated rates, or there could be hourly rates or things like that. I'm not sure. It all depends on how the EGS could work with that. But it's clearly, though, the general services for for 2 should work, and 1 of course is residential.
Well, great. Thanks, Ron. And we're at time now. So this has been such a wonderful discussion. And I think we've got so many new boroughs interested, and we'll be certainly spreading the word. If folks are interested in getting involved, I think with Dennis's contact, is that correct, Dennis? That
Yep.
we give them to you, or reach out to us, and we'll send you to Dennis. But we really appreciate all of you and this amazing team that you've put together to figure this out, and how you're all moving forward with these 5+ boroughs. Super exciting, and just can't wait to see what happens next and how we can assist all of you. So thank you, and hope everybody, all of you, and everybody who's attending today has a wonderful holiday next week. And we're very thankful to have you here today and all of the work that you're doing. So take
Thank
care,
you
everyone.
so much.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks, Matt.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Thank you.